Before we present our health intervention program, let's discuss the definition of domestic violence. There is no single national or internationally agreed definition of family or domestic violence. Historically, commonly held views have been more likely to centre on the physical dimensions of violence. One such example is the framework used by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Violence is defined as any incident involving the occurrence, attempt, or threat of either physical or sexual assault experienced by a person since the age of 15. Physical violence includes physical assault and/or physical threat. Sexual violence includes sexual assault and/or sexual threat. Contemporary definitions are more likely to capture a wider range of intimidating or controlling behaviours, including violent, threatening, or other behaviour by a person that coerces or controls a member of the person's family, the family member, or causes the family member to be fearful. This broad definition covers physical and sexual assault, economic abuse, deprivation of liberty, harm to animals and property, threats, taunts and stalking, isolation of a family member from friends, family and culture, and exposure of children to violence. Research suggests that a community's perception of domestic violence not only has a direct impact on reporting, but also affects help seeking, service provision, and ultimately outcomes for those impacted by domestic violence. Now that we have defined domestic violence, this is where our health intervention program comes into play. Silence is Violence Safety Portal is to educate secondary school students through their own research and collaboration to develop a thorough understanding of domestic violence. The Silence is Violence Safety Portal will be used to inform students of all ages and genders on a range of topics associated with domestic violence, dating violence, equality and inclusion, including the ability for those who have witnessed or are dealing with such violence to feel safe in contacting the appropriate authorities. The eventual outcome of our health intervention program is that all students have become advocates against violence of any sort before leaving secondary school. A Silence in Violence Safety Portal for secondary school students is extremely important. But why? Let's have a look at some of the statistics associated to domestic violence. The following domestic violence statistics are frightful. 48% of violent assaults are seen or heard by children. 15% of women since the age of 15 have been assaulted by someone they know, and 62% of assaults on women have taken place in their home by a male they know. 61% of all violent assaults on women occurred whilst they had children in their care. 73% of women had experienced multiple violent incidents. 58% of women have never contacted the police, whilst 24% of women have never sought advice or support from a single person or company. The following four statistics give prevalence to the rates of violence against women, starting with 1 in 6 Australian women had experienced physical or sexual violence from current or former partners, whilst 1 in 5 Australian women had experienced sexual violence, and 1 in 4 Australian women had experienced emotional abuse by a current or former partner. And sadly, 1 in 3 Australian women had experienced some form of physical violence. But what about men? As much as men are reported to be the perpetrators of violence, can men also become the victims? The short answer is yes, although not to the same degree as women, but nonetheless 1 in 10 Australian men are physically assaulted by their current or former partners each year.
Our vision at Silence is Violence is to create a safe place for those whose voices may never be heard. The Silence is Violence Safety Portal is a primary prevention social change initiative that works through a primary prevention approach within secondary schools. Based on the understanding that early prevention and education across all genders is central to achieving social change necessary to stop violence against women. SIV engages secondary school students to research and educate themselves on domestic violence, to become aware of those in need, and to become advocates against such violence. So what will our campaign achieve? Violence prevention, awareness raising, and leadership. Our objectives for violence prevention are to allow for students to research domestic violence through the creation of their sites, as well as to educate school staff on the severity of this topic and the need for implementing education in class. Our objectives for awareness raising are to educate students on the signs of someone going through domestic violence, as well as to create an environment for students to encourage others to seek help and to provide the resources needed. Our objectives for leadership are to promote leaders in each year level for students to reach out to, as well as to implement education on all types of violence, as well as when and how to take action.
Now let's look at Safety's Violence Safety Portal campaign and rationale. So why start with students? Research states that in Australia, 1 in 4 children are exposed to domestic violence. If children witness domestic violence, there is an increased risk of mental health, behavioural and learning difficulties in conjunction with coping behaviours, especially when exposed to such violence in their homes. So why target both genders? Research has found that building equality and respect between both sexes can reduce the attitudes in which support violence. Thus, by educating and targeting both genders, a holistic approach is provided to preventing domestic violence, including bullying, whether at home, school or in the workplace. So what is Silence's Violence Safety Portal? It's a very safe place for students to learn about the different forms someone can be a victim to domestic violence, including harassment, bullying and sexual violence. Silence's Violence is a safe place for a student to visit if they are a victim or know someone experiencing domestic violence. Silence's Violence Safety Portal is a safe place where students can find help and communicate with appropriate authorities such as helplines. Silence's Violence Safety Portal will be built for students to be educated about domestic violence. All students from Year 7 to 12 will be involved in researching and designing the safety portal. This will include leaders from each class of each year level. The great thing about Silence's Violence Safety Portal is that it can only be accessed from school, not available from home or a mobile device, thus creating a safe space for students who are victims of domestic violence at home. What about teachers? Will they be involved? Teachers are there to supervise and assist students when needed. However, it is a student's sole responsibility in researching and designing the safety portal. What about parents? They have no involvement and won't be allowed to access this portal under no circumstances. When will the government be involved? Once all parameters are met in conjunction with the Victorian Curriculum and Assessment Authority, the Department of Health and Human Services Victoria, and the Department of Education and Training's requirements, the school will be rewarded with financial assistance to build the portal.
This part of the presentation will be associated to the reviews and evaluations of the Silence's Violence campaign. There are 4 different types of reviews and evaluations we're going to be looking at, and these include student surveys, teacher surveys, impact evaluations, and outcome evaluations. Student surveys will be used to critically analyse the campaign as soon as it has been launched. The survey will consist of a list of multi-choice and short answer questions that will be kept confidential. Questions will be based on students' opinions surrounding the use of the resources such as the online space that students can log into. As the campaign is based in a school setting, this survey will allow students to give their instant feedback on the new campaign. It will determine how well the campaign has impacted on the students, positive or negative, providing an indication on how well the students have adapted to the campaign, but also providing us with the opportunity to make changes and improvements. Teachers will be provided with a survey similar to students, providing feedback on all areas of the campaign, including student feedback on the Silence's Violence Safety Portal campaign. The survey will consist of short answer questions and will be kept confidential. The questions will relate to the changes in students' behaviour since the implementation of the campaign, allowing teachers to interact with their students, reporting on the attitude of their students towards the subject of violence, and whether it is positive or negative. The survey will be completed 4 weeks after the launch of the campaign. Impact evaluation looks at the immediate effect the campaign has on the environment it has been implemented to, in our case, the secondary school environment. The impact evaluation looks at quantitative data, such as reporting on how many students are logging onto the campaign portal space. The school will be provided on indicators on how many students across the school are using the resources allocated to them. The school will also be provided on quantitative data about the login numbers of each student per day. As the campaign is school access only, this provides us an indication on how many students are involved with the campaign, allowing us to make any required changes to the campaign, including improvements, new features, and up-to-date domestic violence information. The last evaluation is the outcome evaluation. The outcome evaluation assesses the strengths, weaknesses, and future opportunities for improvement of the campaign. It includes how effective it's been in the secondary school environment, and will look whether the campaign has achieved its outcomes for the directives of the priority population. Ultimately, the findings of this evaluation will come from members of the school board, such as teachers, students, and even the school principal.